Tuesday, and even though we have reached week number 3, thanks for checking out the new Sportsline podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neill. As we like to say in these parts, if you can make it in Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara, you could make it anywhere. And it's those teams, athletes, executives, and broadcasters who will be center court on the Sportsline podcast. Well, there's no doubt that when this individual was mapping out his career as far back to his days at Frontenac Secondary School in Kingston, he had a game plan. And as a quarterback at that high school and McMaster University, he executed. With even larger goals to transfer those skills to the media, he followed a plan. Morning show host, radio play-by-play for the Tiger Cats, and now all of that preparation has him at TSN as one of the network's play-by-play announcers and analysts for the Canadian Football League. Marshall Ferguson, this is an honor for me, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go way back to your beginning days, before you even got into TSN radio at the time. You're doing some spot work at Cable 14. We kind of mixed ways with some McMaster football. You'd finished playing. You did some work with Scott Radley on CHML, and you were the budding young broadcaster, and look where you are today. And it's actually really cool for me because I love good stories, and you're certainly one of them.
Oh, thank you for the incredible introduction. Not sure I'm worthy of it. I think a thread throughout this conversation will be that I've been very lucky a lot of different ways and gotten a lot of opportunities that I couldn't have even imagined. So, but yeah, I mean, I remember being at the student radio station at McMaster University in the basement, and the whole reason I got into it was Lindsay Hamilton, who's now of SportsCenter fame and works all over TSN as like the premier talent of all talents. She basically said, hey, can you come down for an interview? And I said, well, can I just be your co-host? And she thought, okay, here's just another jock who wants to hear his voice on the radio. And sat down with her, did a test show. Chemistry was great. And she said, yeah, sure, you can co-host. And it basically led from there to sports director and climbing my way up through it. And
that's CHME, right?
So yeah, that was right down in the basement there.
Okay.
Man, that feels like that was 30 years ago at this point. But it was humble beginnings. I mean, there were times where I didn't even know how to work the board, and you're working it by yourself. And I'm like talking into microphones live on air and sliding things and just hoping to hear my own voice because I'm like not sure where mic 2 or mic 3 is. I'm like, well, I had no idea what I was doing. But like many of us, that's kind of the fun stories from our origins that we get to tell.
You know, and this all started out, obviously, with that football at McMaster. I mean, let's go back. This is 2010, I think, was when you started out at McMaster. And you put up some good numbers, and you were pretty efficient as a quarterback. I mean, look at that. That's your that's your Johnny Manziel look. Is that what you were trying to pull off?
Oh, there? Yeah. I was a huge, you know what, that year, I think Riddell, the helmet company, came out with that face mask. And it's funny because when I originally came to McMaster in 2010, I had the Peyton Manning helmet, like the really big, ugly one that had like the curving bars that you used to wear with the Colts. And I remember I just said to myself, man, I gotta do something to look like I fit in here because this is not going to be sustainable. Because I'm looking at Kyle Quinlan, of course, who was playing in front of me, and he just looked the part. He was godly in his uniform and his practice stuff, and I ended up diving in, and Johnny became Johnny Football at the peak of me playing. And we're both wearing, you know, he's at Texas A&M, so he's got kind of that dark maroon look, and we had the same thing at McMaster. And so white face mask, the clear visor, I'm like, yeah. And then I very quickly realized, as I'm the starting quarterback at McMaster and Johnny's making mayhem happen down in Texas A&M, I'm not sure if there's much I should be trying to be like Johnny Manziel here. I'm like, the look might be the extent.
As we would find out later.
Yes.
As we would find out later. But, you know, again, going back to those days, you put up these big numbers. You had a very successful run, and that team, for those 4 years they competed, I mean, what was it, 26-6, I think was your regular season record, 3 Yates Cups. I mean, that big win against Western, which we'll all remember. Look at some of this. Look at you chucking the ball.
This is a great day. This is a great catch over the shoulder. I remember that one. The highlight of it all for me was slipping Declan Cross, another CFLer. There's a thread here. I played with a lot of guys who played in the CFL, but we used Declan like crazy in that game. Our defense was incredible on the road, as they always were, getting interceptions. And then the one that I love the most was at the end of the game, you dream going to Western and throwing a back shoulder fade, low snap, just basically on those cutoff end zones, trying to find anywhere to squeeze it into Max Cameron, who was one of the most fun guys I've ever been around to play football. So that was an incredible day. It really was. And I mean, at Will Finch, you talk about like local products. The quality of player that Will was, this is actually kind of a funny story. This is one of those things that you look back on it now and you realize I don't know if that was necessarily legal, but you look at NAL and transfer portal and everything that's happening in the NCAA. We actually had the Nelson Lords with Will Finch at quarterback come to McMaster to do a crossover joint practice.
Oh.
The McMaster University football team against Nelson. Now, it was sectioned off. It wasn't like a straight up, 12 on 12 and live reps or anything like that. Because you can't put, we're not Laval. You're not going to put 26-year-olds against 20-year-olds.
No.
So what we ended up doing was, we're in pass skeleton and we're working against some of the defensive backs from Nelson, and they're mixing through. And it was a learning opportunity. But I very quickly realized as I was standing on my half of the field throwing against the Nelson Lords DBs, which great high school program, and I looked the other way in between my reps, and Will Finch as a high school quarterback who's like 6'4" and 215, and he's ripping it way better than I am. And I very quickly went, oh, they're scouting him against their DBs to see if he can play against university level players.
Right.
Like that was the quality of guy he was. So playing on the road at Western and getting a victory down there, pretty special. But yeah, I mean, McMaster football is near and dear to my heart, and it gave me an incredible opportunity to kind of figure out who I was in real time, moving away from home and being around the culture and teamwork that we had in that team.
Well, so then explain to me how obviously, as I said off the top, game plan. Where did the media start to sink in and that this is what I want to go forward?
When I started skipping classes to watch Tim and Sid.
Not bad. Okay.
Tim McAuliffe is, at the time, it was the University Rush on the Score, and Tim McAuliffe has always been an incredible mentor to me, and just somebody that, even if he's not reaching out and telling me, hey, here's what you need to do, or here's what you can work on. We've only had those conversations maybe one or two times, but you watch the way that Tim works and prepares, and any role that he gets in sports media, he just attacks it. And he puts everything he has into it. And the product is incredible. And he's so smooth. And I just remember being fascinated when I was working for the student radio station at McMaster. I'm watching those guys in studio when they started simulcasting onto television. And I'm watching people that are in the industry. And I'm just going, they are able to combine entertainment with actually giving you information in a way that I felt like very few were able to. And
Absolutely.
And they could talk with confidence about every sport, every team.
And they spoke to a different generation too.
100%, yeah, because you have to remember as well, that was Bob McCown towards the back end of his time at 590 The Fan, and I have great respect for everything that Bob has done, but he didn't speak to me. He spoke to the older demographic. Tim and Sid wanted to have fun with us, and it was also, let's be real, to see somebody on national television every day from 1 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon who you know from covering your sport. I could go up to Tim on the weekends and be like, man, I love the conversation you guys had this week about what's happening with the Raptors right now or the Leafs. So that was where I think I kind of got the bug a little bit. I mean, if my dad were to be asked the question of where did your son get bit by it, my dad worked for CKWS television in Kingston.
Okay.
He was behind the camera, but I was in commercials for local dairy shops when I was 6 years old because they wouldn't pay talent. Right? They couldn't go buy kids that would go into these commercials. So it was just like, Brian, can you bring your son? And it was like, yeah. So I've got like a demo reel from when I was like 6 to 10 years old where I'm in like the back of every car dealership commercial where it's like, come on down to Williamson Cadillac because, and you'll see me in the back like scribbling with a crayon sitting at the kiddie table and stuff like that. So I think I enjoyed doing the on-camera stuff pretty early, and then again, like all of us, it's just about refining your craft and trying to figure out, again, not dissimilar from playing quarterback, what am I actually good at? Because when I was quarterback, I was like, I'm not Kyle Quinlan. I can't do the things he does. I don't have the strong arm. I don't have the same running ability. So you get into broadcasting and you see people like Chris Cuthbert calling CFL games, and you start listening and critiquing, and you go, I'm not Chris Cuthbert. I'll never be Chris Cuthbert. I can't do what he does. What can I do? Like, how do I fit into this, and how can I refine my skill set so that I'm more attractive to people who are getting these type of jobs or giving these jobs? So, I think that's where it all kind of began, was just getting comfortable on camera and then making a billion with a capital B mistakes.
I know you're going to say that for sure. That's all of us.
And figuring out after you make the billion mistakes, there's still a billion more mistakes to come, but I'll just try to learn from all of them, and hopefully that makes me better at my job.
TSN Radio 1150 Hamilton. Unfortunate ending.
Wild ride.
Well, I mean, and you again, and I hope you can tell us some of the stories or whatever. But like, a really unfortunate ending, and it really, when I think about it right now, it served a purpose that we still need today. Yeah. But business is business. How did this all come about? Because it was the beginning of something really good for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I will forever be indebted to Bob Harris, the GM at the time of Bell Media, Hamilton St. Catharines, and Robert Gray was the national director of programming. And I think they had a choice when they decided to launch from CKOC, going from oldies to sports radio with TSN. They could have chosen to pay top dollar and go get the best, biggest names available, which I have heard in the origin story of TSN 1150. They did. They reached out to some of the heaviest hitters from all networks everywhere throughout Ontario.
They certainly did that at the Team 1050.
Exactly. And that was the goal of what they wanted to do. And then I think they looked at the budget and they went, can we just go get the kid who doesn't know what he's doing from Mac? He's down the street. We're not going to have to pay him anything. It's fine. Let's just go get him. So my actual origin story, and I laugh so much at this now, was I got a call from a number I didn't know that said, can you come up on Monday to my office here on the Hamilton Mountain and have a conversation? My name is Bob Harris, and I basically run the station here. And I didn't really think anything of it. At the time, I was working as a server for Boston Pizza on Main Street West. I'd been there bartending and serving and all that for 6 months since I had essentially graduated. And it was the morning after the Seahawks-Patriots Super Bowl with the greatest defensive play in the history of Super Bowls, in my opinion. And I remember I went up, shook Bob Harris's hand, walked in, had a conversation with him for an hour straight where we just talked Super Bowl. I had no idea what I was doing. And he ends the conversation and says, all right, well, it was great to chat with you. I don't know if we're doing anything here. If we do, I'll call you. And I was like, I don't have any idea what that means. Sure enough, a month later, I get a call that says the thing that we were talking about doing is TSN 1150 in Hamilton, and we're interested in having you host a Sunday night sports show. And I said, sure. I also laugh at that because I didn't even ask what I was going to be paid or what my responsibilities were. He literally said, do you want to come talk sports? And I said, yeah, sure. I'm not doing anything else. So I ended up getting an opportunity to do a Sunday night sports talk show from 6 to 8 p.m. And again, my naive approach to this, Bubba, was I had no idea that they were testing me for actual shows because I didn't know how the industry worked. All I had done was student radio. So they're like, do you want to come get some airtime on an actual AM frequency? I'm like, yeah, I love the crackling AM frequency. Let's go. I get to talk sports. So I was in there on Sunday nights, blabbering away to myself, booking my own guests, basically working my own board. And we do that for a while. And then they're just like, hey, you want the afternoon drive show when we actually launch this thing on Labor Day? I'm like,
I'm in.
Really? I'm like, who am I working with? They're like, I don't know. We recruited this group of fun people from all around sports media, from Louis B to Jim Taddy to Kyle Mello, who I worked with for a long time. And yeah, from there, it basically bounced around from afternoon drive to doing a midday to doing the morning show and the whole time it was just WKRP in Cincinnati. It was just, we were trying to figure it out on the fly. And of course, our ringleader was Mike Neighbors, stadium voice of the Hamilton Ticats. And he was the one who made it all somehow work and pieced us all together on the fly with no clue what we were doing in sports radio, but we were just trying to have fun because we figured that's the best way to have our listeners have fun.
And I think that was really, really good. I mean, look at it develop, and we even like Louis B right here at CHCH and his beginnings and getting that on-air experience. As you said, lessons to be learned along the way. Not everything was perfect, but you had an audience. Yeah. You had an audience that was engaged.
Small and passionate.
But the thing was, I mean, this is, again, I talk about it, and as I said off the top, Hamilton, Halton, Niagara, very, very this station, right? We're coming up on 70 years. There's a certain amount of loyalty in this area for news and sports in our area right now, and I'm really sad that it still doesn't exist, and maybe some other young and up-and-comers would be learning and having that same experience as you did. But, so then this, all of a sudden, then the CFL comes knocking, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and you must have been like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, 2015 was my first year working at that time, again, 1150 CKOC Oldies, and I was just like the random Sunday night sports guy. And then we found out, we have the rights to the Hamilton Ticats. And then I found out that they were going to have Andy McNamara call the games in 2015. And so I basically volunteered to call the McMaster games on radio because I wanted to be affiliated with the program still, which honestly was incredible because I finished playing at Mac in 2014. And then 9 months later, I'm calling their games on radio with guys that I had been in the locker room with. You see a Tony Romo leave the Cowboys and go call a game and all the rest. But at the university level, everybody in that room because it's not free agency where half your team is leaving every year or guys are getting traded. It's like, no, this is just our room. These are all the players I played with. It was funny because, again, in the journey of broadcasting and how some of these things are just hilarious to be looking back. Asher Hastings was the quarterback that played after me.
That's right. Okay.
Asher was this incredible talent that came out of Regina. He was a CJFL champion. He was taller than me. He was stronger than me. And when they recruited him and he was my backup in 2014, my immediate thought was, I'm getting replaced. Like they're going to go from Quinlan straight to this Asher Hastings monster because he's so talented. Somehow, I don't know how, I held him off for the 1 year that he was in our program.
You're winning though.
But in 2015, I'm calling the games, doing play-by-play, and I'm watching Asher in his first year starting, and he smashes every record that's ever existed. And I'm like, man, they should have started that dude. Like as I was on radio calling it, I'm thinking to myself, they should have played him because he is so good at what he does. So yeah, I got into doing play-by-play in 15, and then in 16, the opportunity came to call Hamilton Tiger-Cats games. I think the greatest knowledge that I gained from that opportunity was working with Coach John Salavanis. Because if you're around somebody like Coach Sal, it's not necessarily the calling of games on air. It's when you're on the plane with him sitting there and he taps you on the knee and goes, hey, I know you talked a lot about this last week, but I have some ideas on how we can approach it. He's constantly thinking about how to make the show better, how to talk about football in a smarter way, how to combine, again, entertainment with the knowledge of the game. And the thing I loved the most about Coach Sal was we would go to these iconic buildings across the Canadian Football League, and he would sit down the day before and handwrite out his pregame notes. And it was just so old school and classic. And as somebody who has an appreciation for old school football, it made me feel like I was living in a different era because they're basically slapping this 24-year-old kid who's 1 year out of university with this man in his 70s who's been a coach throughout college and professional football for decades. And to be around him, I feel like it made me feel as though I had been picked for something that was really special and unique because Coach Sal is really special and unique.
And it's funny that you bring him up because Mike Morreale, who was here last week, brought his name up. I have to second and third the motion as doing the pregame show as well too, and the way Coach. You're right. His approach, his knowledge of the game, I feel like I know a lot about football,
right?
And I know you probably feel the same way. But yet we still learn something from him.
And this is the thing that I love about my role now with the CFL and TSN is that I get to call, 5 to 10 Tiger Cats games a year. I might be down at Tim Hortons Field for 3 to 5 of them. And I'll be sitting there. I have my pregame routine. I show up super early. I try to get all of my prep crammed in because I learned again from Tim McAuliffe very early on. You got to have more than you'll ever need.
That's right.
And so I'm sitting there scribbling away. And once in a while, somebody will come and tap me on the back as I'm doing my work. And I pop my headphones out and turn, hey, how are you? And say hello. When Coach Sal came in the first time that I was calling a TV game at Tim Hortons Field, it's one of those things I don't know why I did it. I jumped to my feet and hugged him. That's the connection that we had from our work together is that I was genuinely so happy to see him that I laughed because I hugged him and then I basically went, oh, I'm sorry. And he was like, no, it's okay. It's okay. So he was so gracious with his time and how much he taught me in the journey of getting to understand a little bit about the Canadian Football League, even right down to things like I remember sitting in the booth with Coach Sal in Saskatchewan at New Mosaic for the first time. And we're having a conversation with a couple people from around the Riders organization. And Coach Sal, in all his wisdom, says to me, we're paying way too many coaches, way too high salaries. The league's going to do something about this at some point. In comes the CFL football operations cap. Coach Sal called that like 4 years before it ever became an actual rule in the CFL that people now discuss the pros and cons of. But he has this way of, when you've been around and you've seen it all, you can see into the future. And I think he gave me an appreciation for that, and always trying to, very much like Jim Taddy, always look 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, because that will help you understand what's coming and how to get ready for it.
Now it's TSN. Now it's the big boys. And as you talked about being with the likes of a Dwayne Ford, and we talk about guys that you just, how do you know so much?
Yeah.
What's that like? And you're crossing the country and all this knowledge and from all the other jobs that you've put together. And here you are, as we see right now, in a booth, as you talk about the preparation. But that, I mean, I think anyone that has done what you've done and what I've done, and the fact that there's one thing to be in the studio, but the live action, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, so I laugh at these pictures of Dwayne and I, because we work a lot of games in Ottawa, and the first game I ever did was week 4 in Ottawa in 2021. And the first picture that was up on the screen there, my first game, my first quarter, woof. Bubba, I was bad, man. Like, I had been.
You had to be nervous.
Oh my God. But here's the thing. I have an unnatural confidence about myself where I could step into any huddle, in any situation, in front of any crowd when I was a player and be totally fine. And I've adapted that to my broadcasting to the point where I'm like, okay, it's my first game, but I'll prep really hard and I'll be ready to go for this. And it was basically, they dropped it and said 3, 2, 1, you're live. And I hope nobody ever watches the first quarter of that game, because it was incredible how different it felt the first time. But again, it's one of those billion mistakes that you make, and you just adapt and figure it out along the way. But Dwayne was right there with me, trying to loosen me up, trying to calm me down. And again, the consistent thread of this conversation is, I've had a lot of people who've given me a lot of opportunities, but there's also been people from Tim to Coach Sal to Dwayne that have pushed me along the right path and just tried to help, right? Which in our business isn't always the truth. It's competitive. There's not very many jobs at the top end of it.
Great point.
And so to have that many people just genuinely trying to help, I think is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. And Dwayne also, as you can see from the one picture of us pregame in Ottawa, off-air Dwayne, my job, I deem it to bring off-air Dwayne on air, because off-air Dwayne is one of the funniest people I've ever been around. I couldn't believe
when I found that. Because that just doesn't happen. You know this.
But off-air Dwayne is in every commercial break. Even, they'll be counting down in our ear coming out of a commercial break, or 10 seconds before the game. And, okay, guys, here we go. Everybody have a great show in 7, 6. And then Dwayne will undo his tie and look into the camera and go, who's this Mitchell that's playing for the Tiger Cats today? Who is that? Someone tell me where's he from? Like, he'll just ask these questions where everyone is. And then, of course, we go live. He pulls the tie and he goes, here's Bo Levi Mitchell, a multiple-time Grey Cup champion. And he becomes Dwayne. And I'm like, how do we get off-air Dwayne on camera so that people can see how incredible this guy is?
That won't happen.
I agree. Yeah. He's one of the most professional people I've ever been around, but I honestly think he's the glue that holds together our entire crew.
Well, I would think at some point you're probably going to lose him, because I could see him being a general manager in the league at some point.
He should have been already.
You're probably right.
I mean, there's multiple opportunities. This is one of the great advantages of being Dwayne's friend, is that he will send me his opinions on what is happening with player movement around the Canadian Football League, or what he would do with a roster or a team. And he's not jumping all over a team and saying they don't know what they're doing, they're clueless. He's just saying, here's how I would do it. I believe this is a better, smarter way that we could be able to do this and manipulate this rule, or to attack it in this way. And every single time that he sends me one of these 800-word text messages, I always read the entire thing, because you're gaining so much knowledge, and it opens my eyes to a different way of approaching the game, again, with all the experience he has. And you see the way that he presents it, and I feel so stupid, because my response back to him via text every single time is, wow, you're right. I'm like, I don't know how to add to this anymore. And he should have been that, but I also believe that for a long time, he should have been calling the Grey Cup, because I believe that he is the absolute best analyst voice that we have in the country. No slander to Glenn Suter or to Matt Dunnigan or Paul Appelese, who's in with our crew right now, but I think Dwayne represents everything that is great about Canadian football, and he should be celebrated for that, and I really hope he gets a chance to call a Grey Cup. And if I get a chance to call a Grey Cup alongside Dwayne one day, it would be the marquee moment of my broadcasting career.
Well, here you are, and yet, and right now you're in the middle of this all, right? I mean, and you're surrounded by. I think this is really interesting for you. I would consider this interesting for yourself, and the fact that you've got guys like Smitty ahead of you, like I mean, guys experienced like that. You had Chris Cuthbert a little bit just right there when you were kind of getting in as well too. But then there's like you, Dustin, as well too. I mean, and Dustin calls a great game too. I mean, what's the word? The thing? Whoa, how did that happen? What happened?
My favorite was Cornelius throwing a ball backwards over his head in Edmonton this year.
So good.
I was watching it live when Dustin screamed, "Oh, what is he doing?
What is he doing?"
When he yelled, "What is he doing?" I'm like, it's great because it's honest.
It is.
Because through all of our heads was going, what is he doing? What is that? I've never seen that before. I remember watching an XFL game a couple years ago where our quarterback of zero reputation and repute threw a ball over his head backwards with his left hand and it got intercepted. And I remember thinking, that guy shouldn't be playing in the pros. And so to see Dustin do it that way, I love him. I love what Rod brings. And again, Chris Cuthbert was somebody who, when he left, that was basically when I came in. Same thing with Rod Black. When he left and I came in, they both with open arms said, anything that you want, anytime you have a question, please reach out to us. And I have with Chris Cuthbert at various points. And, I've gone up to his place to have lunch and chat about the business and how to approach it and what makes us unique and the pros and cons. And so, I have such an unfair advantage to have connections to those people and just be able to speak to them honestly.
But that's why, and again, I've had this in my career as well too, so similar in the sense that people, and I guess this is a product of just being humble, I think in some ways too, where people want to help. Not only that they do help, they want to help. And it's a resource, and it's something that you, in your times of confusion or wondering, or you just can't figure it out, they're there to help you and give you that guidance, or just steer you clear, or it's so important in any industry, I would think, to rely on those people because they're not just saying it. And I know right now I'm at the point of my career, I'm kind of a generation ahead of you, where I feel like now it's my turn to start saying that to people as well too. Right. You know what? Try this, do this, whatever. Don't want to change you, but here's some things that I've experienced that maybe will help you as well too.
And again, I feel like I haven't given him enough credit, but Jim Taddy, doing a show with him, you're in commercial breaks, and we're talking about like the original great of doing the sports highlight show. Right?
Sportsline, exactly. Original.
And so seeing him in commercial breaks, the way that he approached things, and we would have extremely honest conversations where, like, I was working with Taddy when the Hamilton Tiger Cats tried to get Art Briles. And we're in the afternoon drives. That was a funny story. I was camping with my dog, just the two of us, way up north. I think I was in Tobermory or something. And I'm on the drive down, and I have my phone off all weekend. And I turned my phone on, and about 40 text messages and a dozen DMs came in. And I immediately went, whoa, it's going to be a day, right? And so you start figuring out what that's going to look like. And Jim guided our show with his maturity and experience through an incredibly hectic time to be the rights holder of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Because I wasn't a fan of that move. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about it since and found out that there's some different details about what they were actually trying to do. And it wasn't straight up, let's just shoehorn this in the back door. But it was a difficult time as a young broadcaster because you don't know how to handle that controversy. I'm not built for this. I came here so I could talk about Zach Colaro's completion percentage on second down. That's my expertise. I don't know what I'm doing in this situation. Jim's like, I'll show you. Come with me. I'll help you figure this out on the way, right? And that was just one example, one situation, but he did that for me endless amounts of times, whether it be on air or in break, of, hey, here's what we're going to do in this segment. We're talking with this person about this topic. Follow my lead.
It's so important. And you're bringing back memories for me here because I've spent most of my career, CHCH and Sportsnet, where if I want to criticize, I can criticize. And now doing the pre and post game stuff with the Tiger Cats, there's a line. Like there's a different line you have to and you have to learn, we're partners. We're working for the team.
Yes.
And that's a hard thing. And I think a lot of broadcasters from the past didn't have to deal with that. But corporate ownership and broadcast and teams, they're melding nowadays.
You're at the point now where the National Basketball Association is likely going, or maybe even the NFL will buy a stake in ESPN. Mm-hmm. Like they'll literally be paying ESPN as people who produce their content. So I think, the business of sport and the ownership of sport and how it conflicts is incredibly intriguing. But I'll say this as well, not just about that situation with the Tiger Cats, but I've never believed that we have to be completely stricken by that, because then we're doing a disservice to our audience, right? And so I always approach it from, if I make somebody angry, I'm going to do it in a way that I can also be respectful to them in angering them. I'm not going to come out and kill the entire organization and this is the worst team ever. And it is always, okay, here is the basis and the reasoning for what I am saying, which is honestly why I started doing my work with Canadian Football Perspective, because I wanted to start tracking every snap of every game so that I had data and statistical background and reasoning for every argument that I could make. I guess that's the university boy in me, where it's like, think about it philosophically, and it's like, well, if you're going to have an opinion on something or write a paper on something, show your work. Make the argument in a way that is sound and that you can back up. Because I was unhappy when I came out of playing quarterback at McMaster, where it seemed like every article that was written about the Tiger Cats was, CJ Gable is bad. And I'm like, based on what? And I was like, well, if I'm going to say that CJ Gable is struggling in pass protection, I want to know how many snaps he has as a running back where he's in pass protection that result in sacks. Mm-hmm. And then you have to actually watch the film and find out, okay, he was in pass protection, but was he the one that got beat in pass protection that caused the sack? So
looking beyond.
Of course, like you have to do that background research and analysis. And if you can do that, if you have the time, because let's be real, that does take time and effort, then you can present your opinions in a way that if it does anger somebody, I can show them my homework and just go, listen, I'm just showing you what I have done by investing in it. And that's been a huge help to me in my career, because in situations that have been potentially controversial, there have been times where I've just basically gone back at the person and said, it's not just an opinion. I'm doing the work so that I can speak about you honestly. If you are being honest with yourself, I think you would see it the same way. And they still might hate me for it, but difference of opinion is a natural conversation in sports media.
And you just said it again there too, because we are now, as you talk about ESPN, all you have to do is watch a First Take, a show. We live in this sports world where the hot take is the hot thing right now. And sometimes those opinions, which is fair, it's my opinion, this is what I see, but if you can back it up statistically, if you can back it up with facts, you can't be broken. And I think that's important to have that background.
Yeah, and it's...
Not enough people put in the work.
No, and I think, in all honesty, in our business as well, right now, it's difficult because... there are so many cutbacks on things that are making it difficult for people to have the time to invest and to create a genuine, well-resourced, well-backed. It's the same thing with journalism that you see all over the places. There's not enough people fact-checking or copy editors or all of those positions that made it really high-quality content. I think we're struggling to maintain that, which is difficult. But if you can find the time, if you can find the energy, you can feel confident, I think, in your discussion points. And the idea of the hot take being king, I saw it coming. I've seen it thrive, and I just want nothing to do with it. It's like
scary,
right? It's Colin Cowherd is great at what he does, but he has a team of writers that script his show. It's essentially like watching a soap opera. You tune in to see him talk about sports, and 7 different people have written what he's going to say that day. Sometimes it's not even his opinion. He's just the guy who delivers it at a very high level, but you have to understand the dynamic at play there is, in this business, a lot of the time right now, the person who says the craziest thing is the one who gets the most reward, whether it's true or not, or sourced or not, or genuine or not. But once you're at peace with the fact that that's just the way the game is played, then you can go about doing what you want to do, which is, again, why I love doing play-by-play, because I never have to get into any of that play-by-play. A thing happens in front of my eyes. I tell the people on television what happened on the play. We talk about it. We move on to the next snap.
Let's talk about what's going on in this league right now.
Crazy.
And let's end on this, because I think this is just, we had for many, many years where we had to wait till free agency to really, which would happen in either March or February. there would be this long break from basically November and really not a lot of conversation about the Canadian Football League. Well, I feel like we're getting close to the National Football League, in where the conversation is almost annual right now, with the beginning of this free agency period conversation where deals are getting done, things are getting announced. You and I talked about this off air. I have never, ever seen so much social media conversation, and this is part of our life, social media, about the Canadian Football League. And somewhere, whether he likes it or not, because he's old school, Randy Ambrosie has to be smiling, because the conversation is wild right now. Right here in Hamilton, about the Tiger Cats as well, and who's signing, who could get signed. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of this completely unrestricted free agency that has its pros and cons, because you're going to have more players moving than probably should be. You're going to have a lack of continuity on certain rosters. You're going to have a lot of players leaving for monetary reasons, because they want to squeeze the most they possibly can out of their bodies and their career before they can no longer play. Totally understand that. But to see the thing that we love, the Canadian Football League, be discussed nowhere close to in season this much. If you love, it's kind of interesting for me, because it goes back to almost like LeBron and D Wade, Chris Bosh, the big three in Miami.
Yep.
I think that's when LeBron got up there with his tablecloth shirt and said, "I'm taking my talents to South Beach." That's when we fell in love with the idea of the transaction. And then you start having, obviously, I know this is longer running, but like free agency frenzy in the National Hockey League, and then the idea of, every July the NBA goes crazy, and the National Football League free agency isn't as huge, but you always see these moves being made in season to fix voids. And it's the idea of fantasy football, I think, coming to life for people. If you know these names around the Canadian Football League, and you see a Jamal Peters going from Toronto to Hamilton, you go, whoa, didn't see that happening. Jameer Thurman leaving Hamilton to go to Saskatchewan as a middle linebacker. Wow, okay. And then you start piecing it together. Okay, Jordan Williams got acquired by the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He's a middle linebacker. Jameer Thurman is going to sign with Saskatchewan. Does that mean Simoni Lawrence is back for sure at that weak side linebacker spot? Well, maybe, but they've re-signed Mason Bennett defensive end, and he's a Canadian. He's going to need a lot of money. So what are they going to do at receiver? Because Bo Levi Mitchell's back. And then you get the detail of, and oh, by the way, Hamilton was in at more money than anybody else in the CFL on Brady Oliveira, the most outstanding Canadian from last year.
What?
And you start to play this game in your mind in the offseason that you can just imagine all the different combinations of players that are possible. So yeah, to have the CFL in the news cycle, to have people excited about our game when we're not playing, pads aren't on, we haven't even reached mini camps, let alone training camps, let alone preseason. It's pretty incredible to see. And honestly, it's just fun for me, because I'm constantly in the off season, because it's too busy in season to do this, going back and rewatching games in order to kind of extract information out of it. And, I'll be watching a game where Jamal Peters has 2 interceptions now, and I'll be like, oh, man, is he the new Delvin Bro? Is he going to be that big, lanky boundary corner for the Tigers?
With Dane Evans throwing the football?
Well, yeah, exactly. I feel
no
like
offense.
Hamilton, I feel like, probably acquired Jamal Peters because they just didn't want to play against him.
Still tired of this guy.
So that's great. But no, that conversation is something that the CFL has dearly needed for a while now. And the negotiation window, I was joking with you before we began this, that it used to be when I was at TSN 1150, we would do the noon start of the show for 3 hours or 4 hours, whatever it was, when free agency began. Because there was no negotiation window. It was just dead silence, probably a lot of tampering happening, but dead silence to us. And then at noon, it would open and 50 guys would sign in the first 10 minutes. And it was always just mayhem. And we loved it because it was crazy and it was good content. But it didn't create a weeks-long discussion, and it didn't allow things to slowly unfold where it was, okay, that card fell. Now this card can be played by this team. Oh, I see what they're doing. They're piecing this together with that. And to have that, again, it requires a little bit of knowledge of the league, but if you see what teams are doing and how they're trying to build, then you actually know which teams have gotten better and which teams have really suffered a loss.
2 more questions, because I love this so much. I'll start with the Argonauts. 16-2 last year.
Yeah.
What a year.
Yep.
Kind of blank the blank. I can't even know what I want to swear, but I can't. But they fell apart in the East Final and sold out. I loved it. I couldn't. I was like, why can't it be like this at BMO all the time? The atmosphere was beautiful, and they fell apart and they lose. So they're dealing with that, and now their team has been completely, in some ways, gutted. Mm-hmm. Is that going to hurt the Argonauts going forward? I mean, they've got great people to, I guess, rebuild, in some ways. But you figure that if you're 16-2 and you get to the East Final, you wouldn't be rebuilding. Right. Maybe just retooling.
Yeah, and I think that they will promote from within. Like, they traded Jordan Williams because I think Jonathan Jones is a name that not a lot of people will know, but he's a very good middle linebacker. He'll play there. Wynton McManus will play that weak side. Darius Pickett leaving for Ottawa is a big loss because he was absolutely everywhere this past season. But I think that they'll probably be able to backfill that from within their roster. When you lose this many people, this is always the pro and con of this. You end up losing names that people know that are guaranteed, but maybe this is my McMaster bias. Vince Magri is one of the best at scouting and talent acquisition in the Canadian Football League, and he's working there hand in hand with Pinball Clements in order to build out that roster. I am of the opinion as long as Vince is in the Argonauts organization, they're never going to be bad. Okay. They might have a down year or two. They might lose some pieces. When you go 16-2, there's a lot of attractive pieces that are going to get taken by other teams. I think that they will fill from within, but when you lose those players, you also lose their salary. Now you got a bunch of money sitting around. So the second and the third wave of free agency, it might not be that top-end talent, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if you were able to see Toronto in the closing stages of the negotiation window make counter offers to some guys because they're like, wow, we didn't realize we were going to lose Dwayne Hendricks and Jamal Peters and a Darius Pickett and Darius Bledek, offensive lineman, going to Ottawa. And you see all of this come out, and then you go, well, we hate to lose those guys, but now we can go out and offer people that have these pending offers more money than we could have in the first place. So they will find solutions. I guess the joy of the salary cap situation is everybody's playing by the same rules. So if they're going to lose a bunch of players that are going to be high money and teams want to spend that money in certain places, they'll go out and spend that money on guys that they feel very strongly about at the end of the negotiation window. But the key to all of that, though, for Toronto, to me, is exactly what you're talking about with the East Final, because I called the Yates Cup down the road in London, and I was driving back and had the game playing on the passenger seat on my phone. And I couldn't believe how many times I was hearing Rod Smith say, intercepted again. And I'm like, sorry, like, what is happening? And when I went back and rewatched it, there's a great quote from Joe Montana that I loved. It was, you have to see it, then trust it, then throw it. If you don't see it, you can't trust it. If you don't trust it, don't throw it. And it's like, those are the stages of decision-making for quarterbacks. See it, trust it, throw it. And that day, Chad wasn't seeing anything correctly. He was seeing ghosts flying all over the field. He was putting the ball in the wrong spot.
We've never seen that all season.
He was inaccurate. I feel like in that moment when Marc-Antoine Dequoy jumped the flat route and returned it for the pick six, the rest of that game was a write-off because at that exact moment, Chad Kelly's superhuman ability to throw a football as well as anybody, I think, on the planet, because I've talked to multiple people, both sides of the border, who say Chad Kelly's arm is a top 10 NFL arm. It's everything else that is the reason that he's in the Canadian Football League. That's fine. But once he threw that interception that went the other direction and the energy got zapped out of BMO, I think everything else that wasn't connected to his arm just went haywire. So they have to figure out how they can get Chad Kelly into a place mentally where every single snap, from the first snap of training camp to the final snap of a Grey Cup, he's the same guy. Right. Because it just can't be sporadic. That's not how you win in the CFL.
Biggest question in this city is number 21 going to be back? I mean, they just named a snowplow after the guy.
He beat Taylor Swift.
I know. Yeah. What do you think?
I think that Simoni, I don't know this for sure, but seeing him consistently sign one-year deals, I think is Hamilton being honest with him, waiting for him to drop off a cliff in terms of production. And he hasn't. Why I know that you have to be smart, like the old Belichick thing with the Patriots was, when we see a guy starting to trend in a certain direction, we have to get out in front of it and we trade them or we release them. And
get rid of them a year before.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're always ahead of the curve. That's how they maintain that dynasty, along with some other nefarious things. But the idea of letting Simoni go coming off the year that he just had, I would be very confused by that. I think he has earned, at minimum, another 1-year deal in Hamilton in order to figure it out. That guy has got a raw energy and passion for the game that is extremely rare. And until I see him getting blown off the ball by offensive linemen that he shouldn't, or having a complete inability to flip his hips and run to the flats with a running back, I'm not going to doubt him out. And I haven't seen that from him yet. So, Hamilton's got a lot of decisions to make to try and get back on top of the East Division. And that's one of those that you might, get rid of the player, and you might think that you're not making your team any worse, but you're also going to make your fan base pretty angry if you drop that guy, because there's a lot of people that identify Simoni as an entire generation of Tiger Cats football.
Well, and I said this to him when he was on the show, and I wasn't trying to blow him up. The truth is, Hamilton, forever, as long as I've been watching the CFL, has been about defense. And they've had wonderful players on offense. It's about defense. And those guys are on a first-name basis. Grover, Mosca, Zambiazzi, it just goes on and on. Joe, Montford, Hitch, and he's part of that.
Yeah.
He's part of this community. So yeah, that'll be interesting times. And hey, the fun of free agency. Marsh, this has been amazing to talk football with you, because you're a football guy, and I love talking football to football guys. But even better is been learning about your career, what's up in the future, what happened in the past, the path to you getting here. You're setting examples for many others. I know you know that. So again, I appreciate you being so honest and open with me here on the Sportsline podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity. I usually, when the microphone turns on, I have 7 seconds to get to the snap. So this has been refreshing to have a little bit of time to breathe and chat it out.
Hey, anytime.
Thank you.
Join us anytime. All right, folks. Hey, you know what? If this is sports with a Southern Ontario twist, and if it is your thing, the Sportsline podcast do want to hear from you. You can contact us on many of CHCH's social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Sportsline podcast, TikTok, YouTube, and I'll encourage you, leave a little comment, hit that thumbs up or the 5-star button, so we always give you the latest and greatest edition, and understand what you want. For the amazing hands and minds that make this production possible, thank you for hanging out, and we will see you tomorrow.